Welcome to the OT for Life podcast. Today on the show, I'm bringing on Rachel Harrington and Jessica Hill. They are both certified occupational therapy assistants in Boise, Idaho, and I brought them on to discuss all things sensory. Rachel is the creator of the Sensory Project, a company that creates super cute and customizable sensory products, including things like weighted vests, weighted blankets, and even weighted jackets. Together, Rachel and Jessica host the Sensory Project Show, a podcast that goes in depth on everything sensory, sharing tips, activities, and strategies for occupational therapists and parents on how to address sensory difficulties with their kiddos. So hold on tight, because we're sliding into the episode right now. If you're interested in occupational therapy, this is the place for you. This show aims to explore our profession by sharing who we are and what we do. Because for us, occupational therapy is more than just a job. Hi, I'm Sarah. Welcome to OT for Life. Welcome to the show, Rachel and Jessica. How are you guys doing today?
So good.
Delightful.
Delightful.
So happy to be here.
Yes.
Well, I am so excited to have you guys. I think this is going to be an awesome chat. I think it's one of those topics that it can be difficult to understand, and it's very complex. I don't know if that's a great way to put it, but it's really complex.
It's like an onion. Layers.
I like that analogy. Yeah. Sensory is like an onion. I want to just dive on in with something that I have come across multiple times in practice already. And I think it's kind of one of those misconceptions about sensory integration and sensory processing. But something that I hear time and time again when I bring it up to a parent and when I start talking about some of these sensory things that are going on with a child is they automatically, if they know what I'm talking about, they'll automatically say, "Are you saying that my child has autism?"
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys, it sounds like you've encountered that. Like, what what do you say? Like, how does that, I don't know, how do you get out of that?
I think honesty is the best way to handle that. And sometimes you can just say, I don't know if your child has autism. They might. But oftentimes these sensory quirks, if you will, they go hand in hand with autism. So it might not be a bad idea to rule it out. And I like to use the term rule it out because
it's more positive.
It is. Yeah. And you're not saying, oh, your child has autism. You're saying, well, rule it out. Make sure that they don't have it. And then we'll progress with treatment as needed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I will typically just recommend that if they have a question about it, that they go seek the necessary info for it and they go get their child tested for it if they think that it's something that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. But also not thinking of it as a negative if their child has autism.
Which is the hardest part.
Because they're still your child. Yes. And nothing is changing. You're just getting a label, if you will.
Which in all reality can be super beneficial because then they can qualify for even more services to help the child.
And the people working with the child will know exactly how to address their needs. So just making it as positive as we can make it. And, nothing's different about your kiddo if they have autism. And, so many kids now have autism. Like, it's... They should, those kids are going to change the world.
Yeah, they are.
So I think we need to kind of change how people view autism.
How we think about it.
Mm-hmm. And make it more of a positive diagnosis.
I like how you guys kind of approach that. But I think for me, it's like when people hear sensory, they automatically associate it with autism. And it doesn't necessarily mean that. There are so many kids that have some sensory needs going on that don't have autism. And so I think it's like that direct correlation that everyone just hears sensory and they're like, oh, autism. And then they start to freak out. And I like that you said, like, keep it positive, but there's so much more to sensory than just autism.
Yeah, well, I have so many sensory issues.
We all do.
Exactly. And I bet if you talked with the parents, whoever you are listening, if you talk with the parents, you are going to find that the parents have just as many sensory quirks that their kiddos do.
Oh my gosh. And I'm not laughing at the parents, but it's so true.
It is. The more you start to dive into it and build that rapport with the families, the more you realize, oh,
this is where it
this
comes
makes
from.
sense.
Yeah.
And so if you can help them realize, we all, what's the word that I'm thinking of? We all, what is the word?
I don't know.
Okay. We all modulate sensory input differently, and it's okay. And just because our kiddos process and modulate it a little bit more intensely or less intensely doesn't necessarily mean they have autism. We need to focus on the sensory aspect before they can even move on to participating in other daily aspects.
I think it's so important what you just said about when you talk to the parents and you first mention it to the parents, that a lot of times they'll realize like, oh, my kid doesn't like to touch Play-Doh. I don't want to touch it either. Or they start to make these connections of like what their kid is doing that they don't do. Or like if you're talking to mom, they're like, oh yeah, dad's like that, or vice versa. And I always try to tell my families that however your system is, your sensory system, like mom and dad, you have your own sensory systems. Your child is going to be like exponentially compounded on top of that. So what presents in you is even more in your child. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I totally get it. And like all the light bulbs go off.
Absolutely.
They do every time.
You can definitely see when you hit that moment, that light bulb. I mean, I can visualize so many times that it's that aha moment.
Yep.
And I think it's so, at least for me, it's so cool when that moment happens, because I think a lot of times sensory processing is one of those areas that's just overlooked by most people, unless you're highly, highly trained in sensory and being able to spot it and understand it. And so many times we get these parents that come to us that they're at their wits' end and they don't know what else to do, and they're contemplating medication and they're contemplating special schooling or whatever it is. Like they're going to that next level to help their child, but nobody's ever explained sensory processing and sensory integration to them before. And then all of a sudden you start sharing what's going on and why it's happening and all of these things and the parents are like, oh my gosh, that's it. That is it right there.
Yeah. I mean, not a day goes by where I don't think about sensory in one way or another.
Well, that's true.
Not just like
not when I'm at work.
Not from work, but even at home. I'll touch something and I'll be like, oh, there's this pan that I have to wash if I make like a sweet treat, and I cannot stand the scrub brush.
Well, is that just because you don't want to clean it though? Okay.
You don't like the touch of like the grease and the feeling of grease on it? I get ya.
This is literally this one pan. I don't know what it is. It's some weird pan that I got from, I don't even know. I didn't buy it. I wouldn't buy something like that.
Okay.
But it's this one pan. And so then I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes me have a significantly terrible adverse reaction. Imagine what my kiddos are feeling like when they wear their socks on the right side, or
the
right
wrong
side out. No, right side out.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. What's the word?
Right side out.
Inside out.
No, when they wear them the normal way, they feel that uncomfortable feeling.
Oh.
So they have to turn them inside out. That was a very roundabout way.
We got it.
That. But that's what I'm saying is every single day there is sensory components that we have to work through. And once you start realizing what these kiddos are dealing with and what they're up against, the mindset shift is pivotal.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I totally get that.
And I was just going to mention, I just want to let you know what's happening over on our end here. I'm sitting down. I have a weighted blanket on right now, and Rachel has a weighted vest on right now. It's been a long day. We've done a lot of recording today already, and we still have more to do. So we're like over here self-regulating right now.
This is like marathon recording day for you guys then.
It is. I don't know how it happened.
Yeah.
I think you guys should take a selfie. send it to me, and then I'll
Yep.
share it with this episode, and people can see exactly how you guys are helping to modulate and regulate your behavior.
Oh,
Yep,
man.
yep, we're doing it. Using it all.
Okay, well, let's jump back. I kind of wanted to talk about what are other, because I kind of started with my clinical story of a misconception about sensory processing. What are other misconceptions that you guys have heard of, either by parents asking you or maybe at like continuing educations, or just things that you've heard of that revolve around sensory that are just not right?
I think the biggest one for me is just behaviors. And I mean, we talk about this a lot too, is that our kids are bad, they're acting out, they're naughty, but it's actually because they're not getting the sensory input that they need, and they don't know how to communicate it, and they don't know how to get it and help themselves, and so they act out negatively.
Yeah, and you know what? And I hear what you said, like negatively, and I want to like add to that, because it might not even be negatively, but it's different than what the parent or the teacher or whoever the adult is expecting that child to do. And so
Yeah.
that negative response could be withdrawal. It could be overactivity. It could be yelling and screaming that we would naturally consider negative, but it could just be something else that's going on, even like an absence of a response. And so it doesn't always have to be this like negative thing, but it's against what the typical response would be expected.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You know, I just have to say, we just were interviewing a gal who was sharing with us the verbiage that she uses: expected and unexpected.
Versus appropriate or inappropriate.
Yeah. And just changing your language can make the biggest impact for either your children or your clients. And I was like, wow.
I know. It blew my mind.
Yeah.
I never thought about it.
Yeah, so I love that you were saying that, like what's expected and what's not expected, and these kiddos just struggle with people always telling them you're bad at this, or you're not good at this, or this is why you're doing this, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a big one, and I feel like the whole like, is it sensory, is it behavior, like that whole dilemma or whatever it is, like, yeah, it's a big thing right there. What other misconceptions do you guys know about, or have you heard?
Yeah, I am thinking, I like the sensory versus behavior. That's a misconception, but I also think that, I don't know if it's a misconception, but parents will blow off a sensory issue as something that's normal, or it's expected, or it's just a quirk, instead of realizing, no, there's a reason why they're doing it. They just make an excuse for it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my kid, what's an example? My kiddo doesn't like finger painting or something like that. And, yeah, it's okay if they don't like it, but, maybe they're flapping their hands while they're trying to finger paint, that sort of stuff, instead of making excuse for it, understanding the why behind it.
I think too, a lot of it is like, oh, well, my son, he's just rough, but he's a boy. And it's like, but like once you've looked at the kid, you're like, there are definitely like some proprioception, some vestibular, some tactile, like there's some stuff going on. It's not just that he's a boy, or like something along those lines. It's not just that they do it and the parents blow it off, but then we have these parents that are so in tuned with their kid and they know about sensory, and maybe they have a sibling that has some sensory needs, and then the younger sibling does something, but it's very normal and it's very typical for their age, and the parents are like, oh my gosh, there's a sensory concern. So it kind of goes both ways with that.
Absolutely.
It does.
I've seen that for sure multiple times. And it's, it can go both ways, where you're like, I'm glad that you're aware of it and you're ready to take action if needed, but let's just relax for a minute and let him be a kid. also.
Yes. Yep. And I agree with that one so much. I have a 5-year-old son, and it's so funny just watching him as he's been growing and comparing him to the kids that I work with, because oftentimes I do find myself telling the parents, well, your kid likes to run and jump, and that's a good thing. Like, give them the opportunity to go run and jump throughout their day because they need that input. And so it's just opened my eyes to what kids do really need. And then I can help the families with the kiddos who, need more of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like this is a good time. Maybe we'll jump backwards a little bit. And I know that sensory processing, there is so much that can be said about it. And we could talk for hours and hours and hours and not say everything that needs to be said about this topic. But if you guys could just kind of sum it up for somebody that maybe they've never heard about it before, or maybe they're just starting to come to terms with what is sensory processing and why is it important, and what does it look like within our clients?
All right, so you've got your sensory system and you've got your 5 senses plus your undercover 3 senses, which I'll talk about. But it's basically how you perceive the world and how you interact with the world. And every day your body has to process sensory input, and you can break it down into where we are right now. We're sitting, we have to hold our body up, we have to maintain good body awareness between, as Jessica's sitting.
Oh my gosh, it's horrible.
We have to be able to tolerate the bright lights and
to be able to tolerate the clicking of the clock.
Yes, absolutely. So you're constantly in this balance of processing that sensory input. And you've got your 5 senses. So I'm really bad at naming these off too. I have to touch them. Your hearing, your smell, your sight, your touch, and your taste.
Oh, you did so good.
That's because you were pointing.
Yeah.
I can't name those off for some reason. But then the most important, I think the most important ones are your proprioceptive sense, which is your body awareness and your awareness of where your body is in space, and your vestibular system, which is your sense of movement, and then interoception, which is the awareness of kind of what's going on inside. And that's just kind of where it starts. And then with our kiddos that we see who have a hard time processing that, a lot of our kiddos on the spectrum will be under responsive. So you've got your over responsive, under responsive. Under responsive means that they crave the sensory input, but to the senses that tell us where our body is, like your interoception, vestibular, and proprioceptive senses. And they're going to be over responsive to the input that tells us about our environment. So those 5 senses that I named first. And so I think that's a really important concept to grasp when you're thinking about not just the kiddos on the spectrum, but a lot of the kiddos who struggle with processing sensory input. A lot of it is kind of what's going on inside their body. And they can seek the input, they can avoid the input, and they can also seek the input but not really want to do anything about it. So
the kids who just want to keep going.
Yeah. So every kiddo is different. Every case is different. You can seek, you can avoid lots of different senses, and it really impacts your ability to get through the day successfully.
And happily.
And happily, yeah.
I kind of want to tie in something that you guys mentioned in the beginning, but everybody, we as humans, we are all sensory beings, and we all have our own sensory systems, and we all interpret and modulate our sensory input differently.
Unique in the way they process it, and there's no one size fits all for it, which it makes our job interesting and challenging. But I think that's one of my favorite parts about it, is that each child's sensory system is a mystery that you have to solve, or you get to solve, and just being able to help them figure out the mystery inside and outside and what's going to get them through their day the best.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also feel like too, a lot of times, the parents will think that if you address this one thing, this one sensory issue that's going on with the child, they'll be fixed. and they'll be good. But it's almost like they forget that sensory systems mature and they change. And a kiddo that presents one way at age 3, when they become 10, their sensory system might have morphed into something a little bit different, and their needs are going to be different. And I think having that understanding that the sensory system is a dynamic concept, it's not like a fixed role, is really important to communicate to our clients as therapists.
Yeah, and that's actually probably another misconception, is that parents will bring their kiddos in at a younger age and you give them all these tools and strategies and they're progressing and they're doing, better, and you keep helping them, and then they get older and puberty hits and the hormones just mess everything up, basically, and throw their sensory system out of whack. And the parents are like, what's going on with my child? They're regressing back to like they were when they were 4 years old. What's happening? What's wrong with my child? And it's really just this body change and their sensory system's changing. And so sometimes you do have to go back and use strategies and tools that helped 5 years ago that maybe they don't really need anymore because they've been doing so well, but maybe they need to go back to that visual schedule for the morning routine because their sensory system's just out of whack again. And it's hard for parents, I think, to see that and to understand that. And even as therapists, it's hard. It's like, oh, wait, what is happening? Why is it your child changing all of a sudden? What changed?
Yeah. Exactly. So what I was thinking is that when I start explaining to parents, we're all sensory beings, the first thing that they say to me is, well, does that mean that we all have sensory processing disorder then? They automatically jump to that. And it's then you have to communicate the fine line, right? Is it dysfunction or is it typical?
That's interesting that you brought that up. I was just doing this continuing ed course that was talking about the sensory components, and something that really stuck with me was, a kiddo who is diagnosed with true sensory processing disorder doesn't know how to get their sensory needs met. But a person who, us, who struggles sometimes with processing sensory input, well, we don't have sensory processing disorder, but we know how to meet our sensory needs naturally. And so that's kind of the way I like to explain it to parents and families is, yeah, we naturally do what we need to do to keep our bodies alert and focused. But these kiddos who don't have that skill, those are the ones who need that intervention, who need those tools to find that balance.
Mm-hmm. And I'm totally going to pull something in that you guys mentioned in one of your episodes, but you were talking about that kids are born with the potential to develop the skills, and it's up to the parents, it's up to the educators, it's up to us as therapists to help facilitate and help them learn those skills, whether it is a sensory skill or something else. They have the potential, they just can't do it themselves, and they need help getting there.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm so glad that resonated. It's so true. And so often we forget that. Even as therapists, it's hard to remember that on a day-to-day basis. But
yeah, that our job is to help teach them the skills they need to get through their day.
Mm-hmm.
I think this kind of just ties back into what we've been talking about, and what we've been saying is a lot of times when a kid is acting out or doing something that is not appropriate, quote unquote appropriate, it's not what we're expecting them to do. A lot of times it's well, they just can't do it. And I love what you said earlier about retraining our perspective and retraining our brain to say it's not that. We have to help them get there. They can do it. They just can't do it on their own right now. They need the skills. They need the strategies. They need these techniques to help them get to that level of function.
Yeah, and they need us as therapists to think outside of the box, to teach them a different way to do those things if needed. That's kind of one of the cool things about occupational therapy is you can take one activity or one skill, there's A to B, a line A to B to get there. But OTs, we go A to Z to Q all the way back to B, and, they're still getting there to B from A, but we're doing it in our own way and it works.
I think that's such a great way to explain what we do, because it doesn't always have to be linear. And I love that, like, yeah, we can just jump around and figure out what's going on in the moment with that child to address what they need.
Yes. Thank you for throwing the word linear. That's the one that I needed. Yep, that's the one.
Being that we're not going linear on this podcast at all right now. You guys, I'm terming you like sensory gurus, and I want to know.
Oh,
yeah. I threw it out there, but I want to know, like, where, like, how did you get interested in sensory integration, and where did that connection happen in both of your lives?
So we went to school together, and then we worked together for several years at an outpatient clinic. And so the clinic that we worked at is amazing. It's it has so much
many resources.
So many resources, that's the word. Yeah. So many resources. And we just had the opportunity to not, work together, but also work with some other great therapists who had, have
more experience,
who have
and
not past tense, who have so much experience in sensory integration. And then we've both just taken it upon ourselves to do the continuing education on sensory integration, to learn more about it. And then just the fact that we both love doing it. Because if you don't love what you do, you're not going to try to be better. So just the fact that we both love what we do has pushed us to do more. And I mean, Rachel does more than I do. So, I think we just both had really great opportunities when we got out of school. Yeah.
I actually have kind of a funny story about sensory. School's great. You learn a lot in school. You learn more in your field work.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And you learn the most your first couple of jobs.
Yes.
Right? So, Rachel over here, I'm going to be honest.
I love this story so much.
Rachel over here didn't have any internships in pediatrics. To be honest, I didn't want to work in pediatrics. Going through school, I was like, nope, I'm going into the geriatric population. Love them. That's where my heart is. And then I got a job in a pediatric clinic, an amazing facility, like we were saying. And I kid you not, I did not know what proprioceptive system, vestibular system, I didn't know what that meant. We learned about it in school, but just
vaguely. Oh my gosh.
So vague.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize the connection between these senses and these kiddos. And the more that I learned and appreciated not only the kiddos' sensory system, but my own sensory system, it just blew up. And I was like, I need to take in everything I can. I need to do as much as I can to learn about this. This is amazing. And it's just crazy to think that, I didn't think I wanted to work.
I thought you were going to tell a totally different story.
What story?
I'm like, that's not very funny, really. About taking a kid out.
Oh, God.
I totally thought that you were going to tell that story. Now you.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, tell the story I thought you were going to tell.
Again, we're not linear here. So
no, we are not linear. And I have a funny story, too. So you tell your funny story, then I'll tell my funny story.
Okay, so one of my first kiddos ever treating, a little bit more on the defiant side, told me that they wanted to be done with therapy. And this is my first week. Okay, and I'm like, all right, let's go. And so we walk out to the front, to the waiting room, and we're getting our shoes and socks on. And my mentor comes out, and she's like, Rach, what's she doing? I'm like, well, he wants to be done, so we're just going to be done. And she's like, oh, no, that's not what you do. And I kid you not, that moment has stuck with me. And I have learned so many creative and different ways to get a kiddo to finish their session because of that. That's how we learn, and we have to laugh about it, clearly.
You want to be done? Okay, we should be done.
I think we've all gone through that, either as a student or as a new practitioner, where somebody's like, your client's like, I don't want to do it. And you're like, okay. And all of a sudden it's like, no, you can't do that. Like, you got to try.
For me, it's usually like, yeah, I kind of want to be done too.
Right? Yeah, I want to go home.
Okay, what's your funny story?
So I remember, I'm going to be totally honest with everybody here. I remember I was a student. I was a level 2 student at this point, but I still did not have a good grasp on sensory. And like you guys said, like, we had a very vague overview of what sensory integration, sensory processing, what that all encompassed in school. And I think I picked up a little bit about it, but until I actually started practicing and seeing it and seeing definite like limitations and definite dysfunction, it didn't make sense. And I remember being a student and I was like, okay, I have to look at their sensory system. I don't really know what that means, but I'm just going to test it out. And I was like, oh, okay, here, let's just see if the kid will touch Play-Doh. And the kid touched Play-Doh, and I'm like, okay, their sensory system's good. And that was my understanding of it at that moment.
Amazing.
Yep. Yeah.
It's so helpful because it puts into perspective what these new families are dealing with and how they're feeling about it.
Yes.
Because to us now, it's like, it's like our love language.
Our love language. I like how you're going to say second language
I was going to say second language, but then I'm like, no, it's definitely our love language.
Yeah, but there's so much that encompasses this topic. And like, we are literally just like scratching the surface about it. And it takes time. It takes time and it takes experience and exposure to understand what these things look like in a client. And every client is going to be slightly different and it's going to look different and they're going to react different and they're going to modulate different. And I think like it's just there's such a complexity there.
And I think it's huge to know that you have to go and you have to seek out the information. Like, as a therapist, you have to go learn more constantly because otherwise you're not going to be able to help your clients. Mm-hmm. You have to go seek out that information.
And it always changes. All of that information, it's constantly changing and we're learning new things and like you have to stay on top of it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I just want to highlight what you guys said of the importance of finding a good mentor in it, because I think that just speaks volumes. If you can get a great mentor that is pro-sensory and really understands it, it's going to help you understand it and practice even better.
Yeah, it's huge for sure.
So I want to know, what are some of your favorite activities or equipment, or both if you want, that you do within your clinical practice that are like, whenever you get the chance to do it, you're like, yeah, this is my jam?
So we were talking about this earlier today, and we decided we didn't know what each other's favorite piece of equipment was. So we decided that we would say it at the same time, on the count of 3, say what your favorite piece of equipment was.
All right. So you guys don't know what it is. I'm going to count to 3, and then you guys say what your favorite piece of equipment is.
Okay.
All right, ready? 1,
yes.
2, 3.
Lycra hammock swing.
It's the same.
Oh, I love it.
That's amazing.
So it is. So we call it the Lycra hammock, but I think that when you go buy it online, it's called the Acrobat swing.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
There's
so many activities you can incorporate with just that one piece of equipment.
And I have not met a kid who doesn't love it. Maybe they don't like it the first time or the first couple of times, but every single kid that I've ever worked with loves that swing.
Mm-hmm.
So fun fact, I brought on a guest a couple weeks ago, and she's also a clinic-based sensory pediatric OT. And when I asked her the same question, she had the same exact answer.
It's the best.
Yeah, and her reasoning was,
exactly what you guys said, because you can do so many different things with it. And like you literally just like said everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, some kids don't enjoy it at the beginning, but every kid learns to love it.
Yes.
That is so funny.
That's awesome. I love it.
Let's talk about some of our other staple items. Because this is like my favorite part.
Okay.
I love all the activities. I love therapy balls. You can't get through a session without a therapy ball.
That's true.
And
okay, so actually I think Rachel's favorite should actually probably be a weighted vest.
Yeah, I do love weighted vests.
I think
yeah.
that should actually be number one.
You don't like do activities with them. It's like a modality.
Okay,
you know?
I guess that's true.
But it could be a piece of equipment, kind of.
It is. I feel like it is.
Well, I mean, if we're going that route, I love weighted blankets. I love Lycra tubes, anything.
Uh-huh.
You know.
Should we disclaimer? She makes them. Why? In case no one knew.
No, I love all the things that are weighted. I just think that they have such a grounding response, and not just for my kiddos, but like me. And that's how you know I'm a very interesting sensory being.
She is a very high arousal level.
And I need the weight to, bring me down to Jessica's level.
Honestly, I think outside of the acrobat swinging, I love anything oral motor. Yep. So everything from Arc Therapeutic. I love doing feeding and oral motor activities. So those are definitely number 2 on my list.
All right. Pretty much anything. It sounds like you guys like everything. Any activity, you can make it sensory based.
Taking one item and then seeing how many different ways I can use it functionally. So like the other day I posted something on my Instagram about bean bags and like 1,000 different ways that you can use just bean bags. Everyone has bean bags. And that's like my favorite part, is just using that creative, modifying thought process of, these are the goals we need to achieve. How can we use this one item to achieve those goals? That's how I know that families can carry it over, because you can use one item in so many different ways. So it's doable. And
it allows for the creative process. It allows for the imagination to kind of take over. And I'm such a big proponent. I love just picking one activity, and that's my activity for like the week. And I have to do that activity with all of my kids, regardless of age. And you really just have to get creative, because it has to be simple enough for somebody who is younger and doesn't quite have more of like the complex and mature skills. But then you also have to be able to grade it up and make it challenging and harder for those kids that are older and have more cognitive ability and have more of those skills. And it's such a great way to just be creative and have fun and really just make one thing applicable across so many different ages and abilities.
Yeah.
Yes.
We do the exact same thing.
I love that.
Since we're talking about stuff, and I know we got about 15 or so minutes before we wrap up here, let's talk a little bit about what you guys are up to. And I want you guys to kind of share about what the Sensory Project is and what that all encompasses, because I know you guys are up to some great things over there. So I want you to share that with us.
There's so many things. I think that's why it's called the Sensory Project, because it's a project.
It's constantly changing
and growing,
new things,
and evolving. Yeah. So, we started with weighted vests, and we started with our recycled weighted vests that my mom and I were sewing. And then we started manufacturing our weighted vests and just making them so fashionable and normal. And I just think that inclusion is, it makes me giddy just to talk about it. Just to make these kids feel like they belong and they don't stand out from their peers just because they need a little extra weight to make them feel regulated. So we got our weighted vests, and we do custom weighted blankets, and we're rolling out some new products. The first one is a Lycra sheet. So it's a bed sheet. It's the weighted blanket alternative. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So that's going to be soon. I'm so excited for that. And then, I don't, just, we have some other things. I don't know if we can say what they are quite yet. No, just because they're in like the beta, I guess, the beta phases, if you will.
It's better to people wonder what's coming next anyways. Don't give away all your secrets.
Yeah. Keep some mystery here.
Curiosity marketing.
Yeah, so we're celebrating our anniversary for our 1 year.
Oh, for the podcast.
The podcast is coming up soon. So we're trying to figure out what to do for that.
Awesome. So you guys first started with the products and then decided, hey, we should do a podcast too. Is that kind of how it went down?
So the sensory project with the weighted vest is Rachel's business. I don't not invested in that.
Okay.
I told her she needs to hire me, but it hasn't happened yet. But the podcast came about because we were talking one day about podcasts and how there wasn't really like a pediatric podcast out there. Is that right? I've told this story incorrectly before. Yeah.
I mean, no, I just, I kind of always go like, 20 steps too far in advance, and people kind of have to ring me in. And I was throwing out all these ideas at work one day, and we were talking about podcasts, and I said, that's kind of what I want to do. And Jessica's like, I'll do it with you.
So then it just happened.
And we did it.
It was like a contract when I said, I'll do it.
Yeah, I was like...
She's like, sign here.
We did, though. We were just like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? And we like had a couple of just like get-togethers or meetings, you could call them, and bought just some equipment on Amazon and did some research on, we used Pat Flynn to teach us how to record and all that kind of stuff. And we have a gal who posts them or like launches them on the mediums or whatever it's called. I don't know. I don't even know what the terminology is. And then we just started coming up with ideas of what to talk about.
Yeah. It's just been so fun learning about connect with parents and
other therapists.
And honestly, like Jessica, I know you feel the same way, but after a day like today, or after we interview someone, or after we record some podcasts, we just have this energy.
Like a new fire.
Yeah. And
every time.
It's so amazing to be doing what you love and helping people in the meantime. And
I love the fact that we're able to reach everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I have to tell you guys something. I'm such a podcast junkie. I listen to podcasts like all day, every day, because I drive a lot. And like I do it when I'm working out, washing dishes, like pretty much anytime I'm doing anything that doesn't need, like I don't have to be like writing or typing or like really thinking a lot. And I had this like, I don't know, reflection or whatever. And I was actually thinking about like how cool the medium of podcasting is, because I was listening to your interview with the CEO of the Brain Company. As I was sitting in the airport in Delhi, India.
What?
Yeah. And I'm like, this is so cool. Like, I am able to like stay on top of everybody that I follow and everybody that I listen to. And it doesn't matter where I am, as long as at some point I'm able to download the episode, then I can listen to it wherever. And it was so cool because I was listening to you guys and here I am like halfway around the world.
Oh my gosh.
I love it. You listened to our episode while you were in India, and then people in like Australia and Turkey. We've done a therapist in Turkey, like just worldwide. That just blows my mind that we're doing that.
Yeah.
And I think especially like within the sensory realm, it's something that needs to just be talked about because, like I mentioned before, like it's so complex, and just sitting down and listening to you guys talk about it and share stories and talk about strategies and talk about tips, like it's just one of those things, the more information that you can get, the better that we can be as a therapist, and the better that we can help our clients and we can help our students if you take interns with you and volunteers and all this kind of stuff. And I get it. Like, I totally get what you guys are saying because I feel the same way. And yeah, like it's such a great medium to be able to share information and also learn from each other and network and connect with people all across the globe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's definitely a huge learning experience. Every single time we start talking about something new, we're like doing a new episode and we're like, okay, well, we probably need to do a little more research so we can give our families even more information. And so then it just helps us as therapists to be better.
Exactly. And I want to point out that, like I mentioned before, like we've covered a lot so far. Very briefly, we've covered a lot about what sensory is. And you guys have specific episodes based on like one topic that we've talked about. And so if you guys are looking for more information about the tactile system or about the auditory system or about executive functioning or about one area of sensory processing, go check out their podcast because they have episodes for 30 minutes or an hour highlighting what these different systems are and tips and strategies that you can use to address when there is something problematic that's going on with it. So definitely, I'm going to point everybody at your podcast because go listen. There's a lot of good resources in there. And I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to share any other resources that you would have for other therapists, whether they're books, whether they're websites, maybe other podcasts, anything at all that you have found that has helped you guys within that sensory piece.
Oh my gosh. So many.
I've done a lot of continuing education through PESI.
Okay.
PESI. I just recently came across Sensational Brain, and it's amazing. The owner is an OT, and she has BrainWorks, and she has all of these different continuing ed courses and resources, and I've learned so much from her as well. So that's another great resource.
Yeah.
What are some good books? Raising a Sensory Smart Child.
The Out of Sync Child. The Out of Sync Child Has Fun. Is that what's called?
Yeah.
Because that one has a lot of activity ideas.
There's this one book. It's called The Kid's Guide to Being a Superhero, I think. And I'll send you a link because it's amazing. And it's like written from a kid's perspective on how to train the adult or their parent how to understand them.
I love it. I haven't heard of that one. So yeah, definitely send me that so I can include that in the notes because that sounds fantastic. And I love the name.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's like an activity book and they have tons of great activities.
Perfect. Great. Have you guys heard of understanding your child's sensory signals?
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
I'm kind of a visual learner. I'd like to see
What's it called again?
So there's two of them. There's one that's called Understanding Your Baby's Sensory Signals, and then there's one that's Understanding Your Child's Sensory Signals. And they're both written by Angie Voss, and she's an OT. And it literally is like description of what's going on, and here are ideas to help. This is what's going on. Here are ideas to help. And so it's really good actually for parents that they can go in and look at it. And it's like, all right, I just opened up the baby one and it's like, your child arches their back often. And it explains the sensory component of what's going on and then gives you some ideas of what you can do to address it.
That's amazing.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, I feel like I have to read that book.
So it's a really cool resource just to help parents kind of understand a little bit better about their child's sensory system, but also good for therapists to just kind of have in their back pocket of like, oh, I haven't seen this behavior, or I haven't seen this one before. Oh, what's going on? Okay. So there's my resource.
I love that. I wrote it down.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. I just have one more question for you guys.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
I'm so nervous
Are you
every time
ready?
you say
Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. This is a fun one. So, if you only had one word to describe occupational therapy, what would it be?
Oh. Are we going to have to do like our 1, 2, 3?
No.
See if it's the same.
We can if you want, but
one word to describe occupational therapy.
one word.
Jeez.
Oh, I have 2.
Nope.
Oh, I don't like this.
You only get one.
I don't one. Jeez. I have a sentence, not
I know.
a word.
That's the hard part.
Okay, I think I have mine.
Okay, you go first. I'll probably steal your other one.
Okay.
I'm not good with the words. I think I said that.
So, one word to describe occupational therapy, I would have to say creativity.
It's a good one. I like it.
Yeah.
What's your other one?
Flexibility
Mm.
and resilience and perseverance.
Hey. One word. That's it.
Yeah, I like creativity, I think. I'm
I
gonna
like
stick
that
with
too.
You can't steal it. Come up with your
Can
own.
I
You have
just
to
have
come up
that
with your own.
What's yours?
I don't have to say it yet.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's not fair. I can't influence my guests here.
Oh, man. I got nothing. Okay, give me 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
How about one word to describe occupational therapy? How about balance?
Ooh, that's a new one. No one said balance yet.
Has someone said creativity?
Yeah.
Dang it. Can I change mine?
No. No, balance, just because we have to balance everything we see and we do, and our sensory system has to be balanced.
Look at you. I was all impulsive, and you're thinking about it.
I had to.
marinating
It took me forever. Okay, Sarah, what's yours?
No, I can't share mine.
Oh, I thought
What?
I thought you were gonna tell us after
Just
we
like
told
you guys can't share your secrets of what's coming in the works, I can't share my word.
What a stinker.
I know. I have to keep some sort of mystery here.
Okay, a little taste for there you go.
Maybe on my 1-year podcast anniversary, I will answer that question. But we have a while for that one.
Okay, I think I was gonna be. All right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, this has been so much fun. And yeah, I think we just barely scratched the surface in the world of sensory processing and sensory integration and all things sensory. But I love what you guys are doing, and I'm so inspired by the products that you guys are coming up with and the discussions that you're having on your podcast. If anybody wants to find out more information about you guys or get in contact with you, can you throw out some of your details on social media and where to find the podcast and all that good stuff?
Yeah, there's so many. First of all, thank you for all those kind words. We're over here like holding back the tears.
I know, we're looking at each other like we're both gonna cry.
Oh my goodness, that means so much. Yeah, but if people want to find us, Instagram and Facebook at The Sensory Project Show or at The Sensory Project 208. Email The Sensory Project Show 208@gmail.com.
Website.
Oh, the website is thesensoryproject.com. And then
I mean, if you just Google The Sensory Project or The Sensory Project Show,
yeah,
just Google it.
You'll find the funnel.
Our podcast is on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, and the Google definitely works because I was Googling you guys earlier and I was able to find everything there and
everything,
everything, yeah, and Etsy, right? You guys are on Etsy.
Yeah.
I found it. Don't worry. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on and just taking the time out of your busy day, because I know you guys are up to a lot and lots of recordings and you still have more to go. But thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. My cheeks hurt from smiling so
I know.
much.
My face hurts so bad.
That's like the downside of podcasts is they can't see how like happy we are talking about this stuff. Oh, man. Thank you so much, Sarah. This was so much fun.
Yes.
Hey, before you go, I just wanted to say thanks for listening to today's episode. If you want to further the discussion, go to our website, otforlife.com, and join our Facebook group. If you like us, here are 3 easy ways to let us know. 1. Share our podcast with a friend, colleague, or anyone interested in occupational therapy. 2. Leave us a review on iTunes or anywhere this podcast is found. 3. Subscribe to us so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Thanks again. We'll catch you next time, OT for Lifers.
Are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, sorry. It said poor connection.
Oh, no, I'm here. Just keep talking.
Oh, my goodness.
So Rachel's really good with words. So she's going to take this one.
I'm terrible at summarizing, though.
No,
So
you got this.
I'm going to be like a ping pong ball over here.
Oh, no.
I know.
Okay, should we just try it all over again?
Yeah, do it again.
Got this.
Okay. She was good with the words.
Here's a virtual high five. That was really good.
Wow.
The other thing, hold on, I lost my train of thought. See, I usually write things down, and now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, so yeah, right. But this is me. Welcome.
My dog, he thinks he's part of the podcast.
He is.
I love that his name is Crash. I think that is so suiting for an OT, especially a pediatric OT.
He is such a probe seeker. Oh my gosh. What else?
Oh yeah, I hear it.
I think there's kids playing outside and he's crying.
Oh my god.